Welcome back to Compressed History, where we delve into the stories behind some of World War II's most fascinating and often overlooked pieces of history. Today we're diving into one of the most massive and impressive feats of engineering from the war, the Gustav Railway Gun. This behemoth wasn't just a weapon, it was a symbol of industrial might, an example of sheer scale, and a testament to the extremes of warfare. So let's explore the story behind the Gustav gun, its design, purpose, and the legacy it left behind. The Gustav Railway Gun, also known as the Schwerer Gustav, was the largest caliber rifled weapon ever used in combat, and it holds the record for the heaviest artillery shell ever fired. Weighing in at an astounding 1,350 tons and with a length of over 47 meters, the Gustav was more than just a gun. It was a fortress on rails. The origins of the Gustav gun date back to the late 1930s, a time when Adolf Hitler was looking for ways to breach the formidable defenses of the French Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was a line of concrete fortifications, obstacles, and weapon installations built by France along its borders with Germany and Italy. These defenses were considered nearly impenetrable, and conventional artillery couldn't hope to break through. Enter the Krupp Company, a German industrial conglomerate with a long history of producing heavy artillery. Under the direction of the German High Command, Krupp engineers were tasked with designing a super-heavy artillery piece capable of smashing through the thick concrete and steel fortifications of the Maginot Line. The result was the Gustav gun. The Gustav wasn't just large, it was absolutely massive. The gun's barrel alone was 32.5 meters long, and it fired shells that weighed 7 tons each. These shells were so heavy that the gun had to be mounted on a specially designed rail carriage, which itself required twin parallel railway tracks to support the weight. The Gustav gun could fire 2 types of shells, a high-explosive shell that could penetrate up to 30 meters of earth, and a concrete-piercing shell capable of penetrating up to 7 meters of reinforced concrete. With a range of over 47 kilometers, the Gustav gun could strike targets far beyond the reach of conventional artillery. Despite its impressive specifications, the Gustav gun faced significant challenges. For one, its sheer size made it incredibly difficult to transport and deploy. It required a crew of 250 soldiers to operate the gun, and an additional 2,500 men were needed to lay the tracks and prepare the firing site. Setting up the gun took several weeks, and once in place, it was highly vulnerable to air attacks due to its immobility. The first, and perhaps most famous, use of the Gustav gun was during the Siege of Sevastopol in 1942. Sevastopol was a heavily fortified port city in Crimea, and it was one of the key targets during the German campaign in the Soviet Union. The German forces needed to take Sevastopol to secure their southern flank and ensure the flow of supplies to their troops. The city's defenses were formidable, with a series of bunkers, fortresses, and underground tunnels that were virtually immune to standard artillery. In June 1942, the Gustav gun was finally brought into action. The gun was positioned on specially built tracks outside Sevastopol, and after weeks of preparation, it began its bombardment. Over the course of several days, the Gustav gun fired around 300 shells at the city, targeting key fortifications and underground bunkers. The destruction was immense. One of the gun's most notable achievements was the complete destruction of Fort Stalin, a massive underground fortress that was considered impregnable. The Gustav's shells penetrated deep into the earth, collapsing tunnels and destroying critical infrastructure. However, despite its power, the Gustav gun's effectiveness was limited. While it succeeded in destroying several key fortifications, its slow rate of fire and the difficulty of repositioning the gun meant that its overall impact on the battle was not as decisive as the Germans had hoped. The Siege of Sevastopol eventually ended in a German victory, but the Gustav gun played a relatively minor role in the larger context of the campaign. The Gustav gun was also planned to be used during the Siege of Leningrad, but the logistics of moving such a massive weapon proved to be insurmountable. By the time the gun was ready to be deployed, the strategic situation had changed, and the siege had become a prolonged and attritional affair where the Gustav's massive shells would have been of little use. As the war dragged on, the focus of German military strategy shifted, and the Gustav gun was relegated to a secondary role. In 1945, as the war drew to a close and Germany faced defeat, the Gustav gun was destroyed by its own crew to prevent it from falling into Allied hands. The remains of the gun were discovered by American forces, but by then, the era of super-heavy artillery was over. The development of air power and more mobile forms of artillery had rendered such massive guns obsolete. So, what can we learn from the story of the Gustav gun? On one hand, it represents the pinnacle of industrial capability and military engineering. It was a weapon of unmatched size and power, designed to break through the toughest defenses of its time. But on the other hand, the Gustav gun also symbolizes the limitations of brute force in modern warfare. Its massive size, logistical challenges, and limited mobility made it less effective than initially hoped, and it ultimately had little impact on the outcome of the war. The Gustav gun stands as a reminder of the extremes that war can drive nations to, and the incredible lengths that engineers and soldiers alike will go to achieve victory. It's a piece of history that, while not as well known as some other World War II weapons, deserves to be remembered for its sheer audacity and the story it tells about the nature of warfare. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Gustav Railway Gun, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an episode.